Today, I'm going to share a story that will profoundly touch your heart. It's about Margaret, a 78-year-old woman who endured what many consider the ultimate nightmare of old age, being forgotten by her own family. But brace yourselves, because this tale has a twist that will restore your faith in humanity. If you've ever pondered what it's like to age alone, or if you know someone navigating this very situation, this video is crafted especially for you. Stick around until the end, because Margaret is about to teach us that sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised in the deepest sorrows. Margaret arrived in Australia in 1965, aged 18, having emigrated from Ireland with a heart brimming with dreams. She was a determined young woman who believed this new land would be where she'd forge a strong, loving family. She married Robert in 1967, and together they welcomed 3 children: Sarah, Michael, and James. For 45 years, Margaret was the unwavering linchpin of her family. She'd rise at 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast and pack lunches for everyone. She worked as a nurse by day and still managed the household duties by night. When her grandchildren arrived, it was she who collected them from school, who baked birthday cakes, who wiped away tears, and who celebrated every triumph. But life can be cruelly ironic. In 2010, Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack. Margaret, at 63, was suddenly a widow, adrift and lost. Her children, who had always leaned on her, began to drift away. Sarah relocated to Perth for work. Michael became so engrossed in his own family that visits grew infrequent. James, the youngest, developed a problem with alcohol and simply vanished from her life. The years slipped by, and Margaret began to feel the gnawing weight of true loneliness. The phone calls became sporadic, then monthly, then silence. The grandchildren, who once ran into her arms, now barely recognized her on the rare occasions they met. In 2018, at 73, Margaret suffered a fall at home that resulted in a hip fracture. She lay on the floor for 6 hours until a concerned neighbor, noticing her plants were unwatered, called for an ambulance. In the hospital, when asked about her family, Margaret lied, claiming they had already been notified. During her 2-week hospital stay, not one of her children appeared. The nurses observed that she never received visitors, nor did she ever answer the bedside phone. Margaret had built a routine of pretending to speak with her family so as not to elicit pity from the staff. "Hi, darling Sarah. Yes, I'm feeling much better today," she would say to the silent phone. The hospital's social worker, Linda Chen, noticed the situation. When asked about her children, Margaret finally broke down. "They have their own lives. I raised 3 wonderful children, but it seems they've forgotten they have a mother." It was at this darkest moment in Margaret's life that something extraordinary began to happen. Linda Chen wasn't just an employee doing her job, she had recognized something very special in Margaret. And what happened from that meeting would forever change not only Margaret's life, but that of dozens of others. Folks, I know this first part is heavy, but it's important we understand Margaret's pain to better appreciate the transformation that's to come. Let me know in the comments. Do you know any similar stories? How can we, as a society, better care for our elderly? Your words might comfort someone going through this right now. Linda Chen couldn't get Margaret out of her mind. Having worked as a social worker for 15 years, she had seen many cases of family abandonment, but there was something in Margaret's quiet dignity that deeply touched her. 3 days after Margaret's discharge, Linda did something that would change both their lives forever. She knocked on her door. She wasn't there as a hospital employee, but as a human being who recognized a kindred spirit. "Margaret, I've come for a cup of tea with you, if you'll have me," Linda said at the gate. Margaret, surprised and moved, invited her in. It was her first visitor in over 2 years. During that first afternoon, the 2 women discovered surprising connections. Linda was also an immigrant. She had arrived from Malaysia in the 80s. Both knew the pain of rebuilding a life in a new country, far from family roots. Both had dedicated their professional lives to caring for others. Linda began visiting Margaret every Friday. She brought homemade cakes, special teas, and most importantly, life stories. Margaret, who had felt invisible for years, began to remember that she had a lot to offer. It was during the fourth visit that Linda made a proposal that would change everything. "Margaret, I work with many elderly people who are alone, just like you were. How about we organize a social group? You have so much life experience, so much love to give." Margaret, initially hesitant, questioned, "But who would want to listen to an old woman like me?" Linda's response was powerful. "Margaret, you raised 3 children, worked for decades saving lives as a nurse, survived immigration, widowhood, loneliness. You are not just an old woman. You are a warrior with stories to tell." In March 2019, in Margaret's living room, the Wisdom Circle was born. The first gathering had only 3 people: Margaret, Linda, and Arthur, an 82-year-old gentleman who had also been forgotten by his children after his wife's passing. Margaret prepared Irish scones, the first time she had cooked for others in years. Arthur brought his stories from World War II, having served in the Royal Australian Navy. Linda facilitated the conversations but soon realized she didn't need to say much. The group grew organically. Arthur told his neighbor, Doris, 75, who had been living in isolation since her daughter moved to London. Doris brought Giuseppe, an 80-year-old Italian who had been living alone for a decade. Giuseppe introduced Rosa, a Spanish lady who barely spoke English but possessed a smile that lit up any room. What is most striking about this story is how Margaret blossomed anew. She, who had felt like a burden, discovered she was seen as a mentor and a natural leader. She started coordinating activities, cooking classes where each member taught dishes from their culture, life story sessions, and even a small choir. Margaret rediscovered talents long forgotten. She returned to playing the piano, an instrument she hadn't touched since her children were little. She organized a daily check-in system where group members called each other to ensure everyone was okay. The most touching aspect was seeing Margaret genuinely smile again. Linda recounts that in the early weeks, Margaret's smile seemed forced, a social courtesy. But gradually, especially when recounting her tales from Ireland or teaching a recipe, the sparkle returned to her eyes. Pause here and tell me, can you imagine going through this? 6 months after the first meeting, Margaret made a declaration that moved everyone. "For years I thought my life had ended when Robert died and the children moved away. Now I realize I was just starting a new chapter. These friends have given me something I thought I had lost forever. Always, the feeling of being needed and loved." But Margaret's story was far from over. The Circle of Wisdom caught the attention of the local community, and what began as an intimate gathering of lonely seniors was about to become something much bigger. And the most incredible part? Margaret's children were about to discover who she had truly become. Folks, what an incredible transformation, right? Comment below. What moment moved you the most in this segment? And have you ever thought about creating something similar in your communities? Sometimes the cure for loneliness is closer than we imagine. A year after the creation of the Circle of Wisdom, Margaret had become a minor local celebrity. What started with 3 people in her living room now brought together over 40 seniors every Friday at the Woollahra Community Centre, Sydney. In October 2020, during the pandemic, when many seniors were more isolated than ever, Margaret did something extraordinary. She learned to use technology, at 75 years old, to keep the group connected virtually. With the help of Linda and a young volunteer, James, coincidentally sharing the same name as her youngest son, she organized daily online meetups. Margaret became the emotional anchor for dozens of people during lockdown. Her grandma's recipes, her funny stories from Ireland, and especially her ability to listen literally saved lives. Doris confessed years later that she was planning to give up on everything until Margaret called her every day for 3 months. It was in December 2020 that the unexpected happened. Sarah, Margaret's daughter who lived in Perth, received a call from a local journalist. The Circle of Wisdom had been nominated for an Community Initiative of the Year award, and they wanted to do a story on Margaret. Sarah was shocked. She knew nothing about her mother's activities. In her mind, Margaret was a lonely, sad old lady who lived solely on memories. She decided to watch the report that would be aired on the local channel. What Sarah saw on television left her speechless. There was her mother, radiant, coordinating a group of people who clearly adored her. Margaret spoke with an eloquence and joy that Sarah hadn't seen in over a decade. Margaret O'Sullivan is not just the founder of the Circle of Wisdom, the reporter said. She is the beating heart of a community that has found family in each other. Her story of overcoming adversity has inspired hundreds in the region. Arthur's testimony was devastating. Margaret saved me from depression. When my wife died, I thought my life was over. Margaret showed me we still had so much love to give and receive. Comment if you were also moved by this part. Sarah caught the first flight to Sydney. She arrived at the community centre on a Friday, unannounced. She hid in the kitchen and watched her mother in action, organising, caring, laughing, clearly loved by all those people. When Margaret saw her, she froze. For a moment, the fear of being judged or rejected returned. But Sarah did something she hadn't done in years. She ran to hug her mother and apologized for being such an absent daughter. "Mum, I thought you were fading away alone, but you were blooming. I'm sorry for not seeing that you didn't need me to take care of you. You needed me to celebrate who you are." Margaret's reconciliation with her children was gradual but genuine. Michael, upon hearing the story, felt deep guilt but also immense pride. James, the youngest son, was battling alcoholism and found in Margaret not the mother he needed to care for him, but the strong woman who could inspire him to rebuild himself. The most beautiful part is that Margaret didn't abandon her new family to return to her old one. She integrated the worlds. Her children and grandchildren started attending the Circle of Wisdom and discovered a Margaret they had never known, the leader, the mentor, the community inspiration. Today, in 2025, at 80 years old, Margaret remains active. The Circle of Wisdom has expanded to 6 different suburbs in Sydney. She has written a book, It's Never Too Late to Start Again, Lessons from a Renewed Life, which became a bestseller in Australia. More importantly, Margaret has created a support network that has already prevented countless cases of depression and isolation among the elderly. Linda, her first true friend, remains her partner in this mission. Margaret always ends her talks, yes, she gives talks now, with the same phrase, "I thought my life was over at 73. I discovered I was just waiting to begin." The family you were born into is a gift, but the family you choose is a miracle. Margaret's story teaches us that it is never too late to start anew, to find purpose, to be loved, and most importantly, to love. She transformed her greatest pain, abandonment, into her greatest strength, the ability to embrace other abandoned hearts. Folks, what an incredible journey, isn't it? Margaret proved that age is just a number when you have purpose and love to offer. Let us know in the comments. What was the most important lesson you took away from this story? And if you know any elderly person who needs companionship, how about making a difference in that person's life? Subscribe to the channel for more stories that will touch you deeply, and most importantly, share this video. Perhaps it will reach exactly the person who needs to hear that it's never too late to start over. Margaret, wherever you are, thank you for showing us that the heart doesn't age, it just becomes wiser and more generous.